Thank you, councillors, staff members, members of the public. Welcome. It is 5:30. Welcome back to this agenda briefing. I'll declare this open for those who haven't attended agenda briefing sessions before or those who are joining us online. Agenda briefing sessions is an opportunity for the elected members to work their way through the agenda, asking any questions to form opinions for next week's OCM. So no official decisions will be made tonight, and that will happen next week. So we'll work through our way through the agenda and we'll go through there line by line. So, councillors, we do have Councillor Steele is on approved leave and Councillor Gassif and Councillor Steck, I believe, are apologies. The rest of us are here. I do have one declaration of interest from Councillor Ben Andrew on item 10.4.4. which is the scheme amendment, is an impartial interest for Councillor Andrew. Was there any other declaration of interest? Councillor Quain?
I'm just filling out the form, sorry, for 10.3.3 rate exemption for 19 Princess Street as I'm a member of the...
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Quain. That's just an impartial interest?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other declaration of interest, councillors? Thank you. We do also have two deputations, both on item 10.4.1. I've approved those and we will go, when we get to those items, I've spoken to both proponents or both spokespeople who they will have the opportunity when we get to that item. Thank you, councillors. We're moving along to the agenda itself. So there's a number of policies here which have gone through the Policy Review Committee, but we'll run through these if there's any further questions. So starting with 10.1.1. 10.1.2, 10.1.3, 10.1.4, 10.1.5, 10.1.6, 10.1.7. Sorry, these last couple have been from the Audit Committee. Any questions, councillors? All okay. 10.1.8. And this is from the CEO Performance Review Panel. Any questions on 10.1.8? 10.1.9. Questions on 10.1.10. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on this item, if we're going to ask the CEO for comments on the, executive recommendation versus the committee recommendation.
CEO, do you have a response for that?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Andrew, for the question. Councillor Andrew has raised the issue around the committee recommendation versus the executive recommendation. The committee recommendation, as I understand it, endorses the inclusion, and as you can read there, I'm not sure why that's changed with the executive recommendation and why there seems to be a requirement for another report. Perhaps between now and the OCM we can clarify that and via a advice note, but at this point what I would suggest is that the committee recommendation as it stands would be preferred over the executive recommendation.
Sure. If we could provide an advice note for that, that would be great. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Ramesh?
Can I just ask on this 10.1.10, are there plans to have similar communication boards for visitor centre and other areas rather than just the playgrounds and refurbishments?
So I don't know if you've got a response for that, otherwise I know Councillor Andrew might be able to talk on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a particular response to that, but again, that is possible for me to cover in the advice note. I'd be happy to do that.
Happy to take if there's any further from DAKE as chair. Or Councillor Turner, are you chair of that committee? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess the first step was this came out of the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan, so it was one of the recommendations through the community engagement process. However, moving forward, we are looking, I guess, at expanding, and especially through our facilities, as this is an important part of our progress towards Marcia. I guess finally on that, we welcome all those suggestions, and we have done some work in the area with portable communication boards now for events, so we can raise that again at the next meeting for an update. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on this one? Councillors? Thank you. 10.3.1. All good. 10.3.2. Thank you. 10.3.3. Thank you. 10.3.4. 10.3.5. Okay, 10.4.1. So we have the two speakers on this item. So we'll start with Suzanne. Apologies, Suzanne. I can't quite read your last name there. Gallia. Come on up and join us. Thank you. Gallia. Thanks, Suzanne. And as we discussed, you have 10 minutes.
Do I just stand here?
Stand there, the mic's on, so if you can speak into the mic, because there will be some people watching online, Suzanne, so if you can speak into the mic,
okay,
that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm concerned about this, and I know it's a planning application, so I'd like to really address the planning side of it. Not that I know a lot about that, but there are some considerations that you've got in your document about the planning and the concerns, so I can address those as well. Yeah, I mean, I have spoken before and said that you need to do a health and safety risk assessment, and they have got that addressed in here, but I'm not sure that their health and safety has been fully assessed. And then there's an environmental impact analysis for the mast, which is 36.5 metres high, and I see by reading your information that it has to be that high, otherwise it's endangering the trees adjacent and the birds adjacent. But what about the trees that are a further distance away and the birds and the animals that are further away? Is there insurance for the installation? I'm not sure that you've got that in your document, but it would. The fact about insurance is it's a monopole, so it's not insurable. And as it is in a busy shopping centre, that is a huge risk. We only need a couple of tornadoes going through Bunbury like they seem to be doing, and it could affect the tower, and it's not insured. It would be useful to know the technical information, such as the wattage and dBn and the amount of energy being output and the timing of the radiation. Hopefully these details are available to the council for decision making. Is the proposed tower certified, and by whom? Where is it manufactured? The council has a duty to protect people, and such the maxim is do no harm. I know that 5G is not limited to a frequency range and so can perform up to 300 gigahertz, which is an unimaginable speed. And I'm sure they'll tell you that it's not going to be that high, and they'll tell you that the energy output is not so huge, the power usage is not so huge. Do we know what radio frequency it will perform at? And will they change these things later on? Because it says in your booklet here that there'll be other companies adding things to that tower. We don't know what that will be. So that poses another kind of, an unknown. 5G uses a parallel beam like a laser which can be aimed at something. So presumably the fact that it's so high up, I'm not sure what it's going to be aiming at or what communication it will provide at that height. Presumably it's talking to the other towers, because in addition to this tower, there's going to have to be a lot more 5G devices around the city at very close intervals. So this is just the beginning of the end. These radio frequencies have been known to be dangerous since the 1930s. In August 1977, the CIA report showed that these radio frequencies cause bone marrow disintegration, raised blood pressure and artery blocking and breathing difficulties. In 1973, the US Navy produced 2,300 reports on negative effects. I query how good it is or how bad it is and what they've produced to you in terms of guidelines, because the UK created a guideline and omitted to mention harm is due to heating effect on cells, which is like an unshielded microwave. Any metallic parts in the body will overheat, e.g. medical implants, earrings, dental amalgams, cochlear implants. These metallic parts act as aerials and invite the microwave effect. In the UK, degradation and death of tree growth has been shown to occur. The effect on animals, birds and insects has also been noted. The suitability of the location and the need for the development. I might point out, whatever telcos say in this regard, what they're actually aiming at is profit. They're profit-driven. They're corporations. They're trying to make money out of our communications. And is that fair not to consider the other actions on people? They're talking about why it's required is just to speed things up and to make sure that people have enough speed and that. But it's to do with the profit of the companies. And surely we could use other means to send the communications around. The bottom line is that the community has no choice and cannot avoid the radio frequency if this tower is installed. The precautionary principle should be adopted, and so one case with evidence of harm to trees as well, to trees. The arborist says that it's okay because the tree next to it is lower, so it won't be affected. But what about the ones that are further away? There are people here supporting my case who are electrosensitive. Many residents are and deserve protection.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. And then we have Peter Ward, also presenting on this item. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Can I just start by saying I want to emphasise first the community need for this structure. Amplitel would not be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on building a new facility in this area if it wasn't needed. It is a critical piece of infrastructure for the community. The community benefits from that infrastructure through the ability to communicate, particularly in times of emergencies. If you want to know what's going on when there's a freak storm in Bunbury, as occurred some months ago, or if you want to know what's going on when there's a bushfire, where do you go? You go to the Emergency WA website. If people don't have access to the internet, they can't find out the information they need in emergencies. The second aspect of it is telehealth. People commonly these days consult doctors by a video conference from their homes. If the network cannot provide a level of data throughput that is sufficient to allow people to communicate by video conference from their homes, whether that be for telehealth or for work, then they're simply not going to be able to avail themselves of those technologies, and people will miss out on essential treatment or essential work opportunities. The mediation that we had, we shared some confidential data about throughput, and Councillor Turner and the Mayor and the CEO will all be aware of that information. But what's clear is that the network currently lacks capacity. It's not a question of coverage. So to the extent that people are talking about EME, this area is already covered with radio frequencies. The problem is that it can't handle the volume of traffic that now exists from the large number of users and the large number of mobile devices in the community. If you think about your own homes, you might have had one mobile phone in your home 15 years ago. Today, every member of your family probably has one, plus you've got a SIM card in your car and a SIM card in your burglar alarm and a SIM card in your backup of your internet connection. You may even have a SIM card providing your primary internet connection. Every house has multiple devices these days, and every one of those devices is transmitting a far greater volume of data. And all of that data has to go through the network. The only way we can carry that volume of data is by upgrading the capacity of the network. So it's not a question of adding more coverage, it's adding more capacity. I want to also talk about the EME aspects that were just mentioned by the previous speaker. Amplitel or Telstra do not set the standards for these things. The Australian Nuclear Radiation Safety Authority, PANSA, sets the standard completely independently. Every one of these facilities is assessed against that standard to determine what level of radiation will be experienced by the surrounding community. In every case, it is well less than 1%. The previous speaker spoke about the tower being 35 metres to protect the trees. Those who are at the mediation know it's not to protect the tree, it's to protect people in the tree, arborists working on that tree, and also to ensure adequate coverage because the tree itself would interfere with the radio waves. So that's why the antennas are placed up that high. The previous speaker also talked about not knowing what might be added to the tower later. Well, it's a very simple answer to that in two aspects. The first thing is the only thing that will be added to the tower is more telecommunications antennas from other carriers, and they're being added to the same tower in substitution for adding yet another tower. So we're really minimising the impact on the community by having a single tower that everyone can use. The second aspect is that any new carrier that comes along and wants to add new antennas to that tower must do so through the Telecommunications Act provisions that require community notice and require compliance with the RPANSA standards in exactly the same way as this facility will. So we're not talking about there being a great risk of somebody coming along and putting something more dangerous up there. It will be exactly the same sort of antennas. It's just that they'll be 5 metres lower because they'll be underneath the Amplitel antennas. And again, as we've said in the additional materials that have been delivered, they will be above the tree canopy. That's why it has to be 35 metres, is to make sure that that second set of antennas is above the forecast maximum height of the chewett tree. The second aspect I wanted to emphasise is that there is simply no alternative site available. You've got in the confidential annexure to the agenda a detailed report on all the other sites that were considered. Council officers have also investigated every possible council site. There is no alternative. The applicants have done everything they can to minimise the impact of this site on the community. The headstock design has changed. We've offered different colours of the pole. We've agreed to paying the council to plant screening vegetation. We've agreed to changing the fence to the council's preferred design. We've agreed to graffiti-resistant paint behind the facility. There is really nothing else that can be done. With the current technologies, the tower has to be there and the tower has to be that high. There's nothing more, practically, that can be done to minimise the visual impact. And so ultimately it comes down to a balance. Do you have it or not? And in principle for you as councillors, you're really dealing with something that's no more different in principle than widening a road. When a road is widened and the road barrier comes closer to houses, those who are near the road corridor will experience greater noise, they'll experience greater road grime, they'll experience fumes from trucks and the like. But that's justified in every case by the fact that the community needs the extra lane. The community needs the extra network capacity on the roads. In principle, that's exactly the same as what we're talking about here. The community needs the extra capacity of a mobile telecommunications network. Yes, the local residents are going to see a tower. They're not going to experience fumes from the tower. They're not going to experience noise from the tower, but they will see a tower. But that additional impact on those local residents is justified for the benefit to the community as a whole, and particularly those who are around about the 3 kilometres or so from the tower, which are the areas that are presently suffering the most capacity degradation and reduction in throughput, particularly during the afternoons. From 3 o'clock in the afternoon when kids get home from school to 10 o'clock at night when people go to bed, the network is currently stretched, and it will only get worse as more technologies come online, particularly with the shutdown of the 3G network from August. Everyone who's currently using a 3G device, which would presently have longer distance capacity to communicate with a tower, is going to have to switch to 4 or 5G. Even more capacity constraints. The final thing I want to mention in response to what was said by the previous speaker about 5G and not knowing what the impacts are. Well, the fact is that down St George's Terrace in Perth, there's a 5G base station every 100 metres. There is no evidence that that's caused any problems. The alternative, councillors, is that this matter goes to the State Administrative Tribunal. I'm sure you will all have received your own legal advice on that. It is not in the interests of the council to take it there. I'm sure that you'll know the risks and you'll know the costs. It is important that councillors do the job they're paid to do and make a decision on this, having regard to all of the real evidence, not the concerns that are without foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillors, are there questions on item 10.4.1? No questions? Probably just have one. I know there was just a couple of outlines from that, the other users or potential other users. Would that also require another DA if there was a further use to CEO? If another user was to come in, would that also require a DA process?
Thanks, Mayor. I may just ask the Manager of Planning and Building to answer that question.
Through the Mayor, the tower is the only thing that requires development approval. Any additional antennas do not require development approval. They will fall under different legislation called a low impact facility and are exempt from requiring development approval if they meet certain criteria.
Sure, but as was explained, it would still go through the Telecommunications Act and policy. It would have to require their standards that are required. Great, thank you. No further questions on this item, councillors? Thank you. Thank you for the speakers. Obviously, council will deliberate on this matter next week and have a decision. You are welcome to make a deputation next week as well. Both speakers who spoke tonight or any other members, public who may be watching, you can also make a deputation next week and council will consider this item. You're welcome to stay with us we have a few more items. If not, you can also leave now, but it's up to you. We'll keep moving. Item 10.4.2. Which is the Southwest design. So this is just noting this, councillors, and noting that this report is confidential. So if there are any questions, I'll ask if there's any questions first. If there's going to be any questions which are of confidential nature, we'll go behind closed doors. But are there any questions? Councillor Andrew?
Wrong button, Mr Mayor. I guess what's the, in the process, once it goes through the design review panel, then what's the next steps, I guess, if this process? Is it DA?
Sure, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. I may defer that question to the Director of Sustainable Development. His first time he gets to answer a question, Mayor.
Yep, got it. Sorry, what was the question again?
So with this is obviously noting this information. What would be the next steps that happen from here? So when would it sort of move towards a DA position, or basically the process from here?
Yeah, my understanding is it would go through the DA process. Is that, yep. Having been out of planning for a little while and getting back to terms with it, excuse me.
Sure, that's okay. All good. Thank you. No, I will acknowledge the director next week in a formal setting. So I didn't forget our new addition to the staff up here. We'll get to that. Was there any other questions on this, councillors? Thank you. 10.4.3. Questions on this item, councillors? All good? Oh, sorry, Councillor Andrew.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. Just noting when this was originally adopted, the housing strategy, and it's a good bit of reading. When is the next review of this? Is there a plan reviewed as a part of a cycle? When do we see the next iteration, I guess?
CEO?
I might get the Manager of Planning and Building to answer that.
Through the Mayor, the housing strategy is a document that's endorsed by council. It has no statutory weight or any statutory requirements for review. But what does need reviewing is our local planning strategy. So this item is about elevating the status of the housing strategy into our local planning strategy, and then it will become part of the 10-year cycle review of our strategy.
Thank you. Further questions? Ten 10.4.4, noting the applicants, planners are here in attendance and briefing next door. Thank them for that. Was there any questions on this, councillors? Great, thank you. Councillors, we'll deal with 10.5.1 next week again. For those who weren't here last week, we just had one appointment from Councillor Turner, but we held it over because there was a number of elected members not here for the previous meeting. But we'll deal with that. Was there any other questions before on that one? That's great. We'll deal with that next week. See if Councillor Turner can get someone to join. Thanks, councillors. It brings us to a close. Thank you very much, and we'll likely see you all here next week. Thank you very much. Declare it.